Yo, what is up everyone, this is Tyrannic Swine here and welcome to another game review. This time I'm reviewing Rainbow Six Siege, a tactical shooter developed and published by Ubisoft, and it's a continuation of the Rainbow Six series. Its story is, well, let's say its story is very simple. It is basically a new terrorist organization called the White Mask have come out of the shadows and have started attacking the general public, and a special group of operators from around the world have come together to try and stop them. Now, going into this game, I wasn't especially hyped for it, especially after playing the Vegas games, which weren't exactly great in my opinion if you've seen my reviews of them. The thing is, this game decides to completely get rid of the campaign, which was probably actually a smart move. The campaign section of the Vegas games was always a weak point. Terrorist Hunt and the multiplayer were actually a lot more stronger compared to the campaign, as the campaigns in the Vegas games had really nothing there. They had no characteristics, no interesting story, and were just plainly shit to play overall. So Siege decides to give you a small section called Situations where you play a few tutorial missions so you can get a hand on the mechanics of the game, and then you have this one mission at the end which is sort of a tutorial mission of what to expect from the game, like the Terrorist Hunt and the multiplayer and what to expect from them. And honestly, it was probably a smart decision to make for Rainbow Six Siege, as the multiplayer and Terrorist Hunt were always the stronger game modes. So the fact that they decided to abandon having a campaign completely altogether and just giving you some tutorials of how the game works was probably a very smart decision on Ubisoft's part, since, yeah, I just really hated the campaigns in the Vegas games since they really offered very little. Although I will admit though, the fact that they have a new terrorist organization just coming out of nowhere called the White Masks, it makes very little sense. But to be honest, we don't really give two shits, to be honest. We didn't give two shits about the villains in the Vegas games, so we're obviously not going to give two shits about these guys. But what they definitely are is a lot more smarter compared to their Vegas counterparts. Now, there is only two game modes in Siege, which is Terrorist Hunt and the multiplayer. Let's begin with the Terrorist Hunt, since that is a more iconic game mode in the franchise, and it's definitely been improved upon from the Vegas games. The enemy AI especially, since they no longer come at you in a conga line when they've been alerted to your presence, which has always been a problem with them, and it's always made them a bit easier to take down even if you are on a harder difficulty. In this game, they tend to be a lot smarter, building up defenses and putting obstacles in your way to make it more difficult to take them out, and you have, yet again, a limited number to take out in a limited time too. And this can obviously make things a little bit tense when you have no idea where the last enemy could be, because these maps can be pretty big, but we'll get to that later. There is also a few different types of terrorists, since they have like their usual assault rifles and can use shotguns. There's also the suicide bomber, who can be a pretty big pain in the ass, even though it's easy to hear where their position is, as they usually have their Darth Vader breathing masks on. They will run at you. They'll be shooting and running at you at the same time, and then if they get close enough, they'll blow you to pieces, making them a pretty difficult foe to fight against. But unless you get that lucky headshot on them, you'll be pretty fine. But yeah, the Terrorist Hunt mode is fairly simple as usual, and there is a couple of other things with it instead of just like securing the area and taking out like the amount of terrorists that there is. There's also a Disarm the Bomb mode, which is basically where you find a couple of bombs throughout the level and basically try to deactivate them while basically facing a limited amount of enemies in a limited time as well, which also makes the situation tense as well. And there's also a hostage rescue mode that also will be played out. And the thing is, this is a bit sad really, unless I think you do custom game, but you don't have a choice to select which of these game modes you can do. It's always random. So if you're trying to do something specific or want to do something specific, I don't think you can do that unless you go into custom game. I don't know, I haven't exactly tried it myself, even though I have played Siege for a bit. But yeah, there's a bit more variety to the Terrorist Hunt game mode this time around compared to the Vegas games. And yeah, a lot of things have been improved upon. Now, the multiplayer in the Vegas games always felt lacking. It just felt like an add-on that was just put there to give you something extra to play. But in Siege, the multiplayer is the meat of the game. It's definitely where you're going to be playing the game most, as you pretty much have a team of 5v5 going up against each other, trying to wipe each other out until pretty much one team is completely dead. And that is pretty much the whole multiplayer, as there's only like a few game modes, like 2 from what I know, which is disarming devices or rescuing a hostage. But the fact is, despite there being a lack of game modes, it is incredibly an intense game. The matches can be really good. Despite there being only 5v5, each operator that you choose can change the whole battlefield in one fell swoop, and it requires a lot of skill, precision, and teamwork. That is probably one of the best additions to the multiplayer, is the fact that it decided to concentrate on these aspects, and it makes every match just ever so random. You have no idea what the outcome will be, as the amount of operators that you can choose from obviously will have different outcomes with the matches, and the amount of matches you can have, or the amount of rounds, can also differ. You can have, I think, up to 5 or 6 maximum, depending on the skill set of your team and the enemy. So each match, it can be an epic fight, or it can just be a pushover. It all depends on the team that you have, or the team that the enemy has. And that's what makes the multiplayer really great, is the fact that the levels, the operators, the player themselves, all come together as one cohesive thing, which just makes the game incredibly fun to play, and it never gets boring, really. Because of the diverse amount of operators, you have obviously different ways of going about through the match. So the multiplayer has definitely been improved upon from the Vegas games by a huge amount. Now, you play a different selection of operators who are special forces taken from different parts of the world. Basically, like for example, the British SAS, the American FBI, the Russian Spetsnaz, the French GIGN, or the German GSG, just to name a few. And these are split into 2 sections, attackers or defenders, and each of these are used for specific game modes, or specific positions that the teams will take, as obviously when it comes to deactivating devices, you'll have one team of attackers and one team of defenders, and you obviously swap these roles depending on the outcome of the rounds. What's really great about the operators is that there is a huge amount of them. Obviously in the beginning, when this game first came out, there wasn't a lot. There was only like the default selection that you had that I basically said, and it's obviously grown over time, but we'll get to that in a minute. But right now, the operators each of them have special abilities, a special ability that's only unique to them. And these can obviously turn the tide of a match very quickly, as if someone is able to use these special abilities very effectively, they can wipe the other team out. And some of the operators are a bit more overpowered compared to some, but it creates a good balance. And obviously that balance is also held up with the player themselves. Each of the operators have a decent amount of armaments to them, customization. Like the amount of weapons you have in this game, you're gonna have like a primary and a secondary. Your primary is gonna be like, depending on the class, like assault rifle, SMG, LMGs, shotguns, all that sort of things, and you just have like, for your secondary, it's kind of surprising really, you have like a few selections there, depending on the operator. Some have pistols, some have SMGs, some machine pistols, and even some have small shotguns. So your weapon can be just as deadly as the player who's wielding it. You also have an assortment of gadgets to use, like frag grenades, stun, flash grenades, metal barriers you can use to form a defensive position, barbed wire to make as an obstacle. You also have spy drones that can like find the objective or pinpoint what kind of operator the enemy player is, which is also nice. You can combat against that. The gadgets are a very tactical part of the game and kind of makes it what it really is, and it's very nice to use these sort of stuff. The customization is quite variative in different spectrums. For your weapons, there is quite a lot of like customization, different attachments, different camos, and there is quite a lot of those, and I'll get to that in a minute. But for your operator, there isn't that much customization. It's kind of lacking, and the customization itself isn't all that great. It looks very shit in some cases. Some bits are like a little bit better, but most of the other customization parts for your operator doesn't look too great, really. The weapons themselves can be incredibly accurate and effective if you know how to use them. If someone really knows how to use the weapon they are holding, they can get incredible headshots from certain distances, and you can die insanely quick in this game. That is a penalty, as since when you die, you die. You have no respawns or anything like that, and it can be very surprising how that goes. Yeah, it can kind of suck if you die straight away without getting any kills, but if your team manages to make a nice, decent comeback, then you obviously have another chance to kick some ass. But when you kick ass, it can be very surprising what happens. Even though you're up against 5 players, you can be incredibly effective and even wipe out the whole team yourself if you know what you're doing, which is basically thanks to the gadgets and the weapons you are holding in your hands. So the way weapons work in this game is a lot more effective compared to previous Rainbow Six games. Now, the level design has definitely been improved upon from the Vegas games. In those, you're just basically wandering around until you find all the enemies. In Siege, there's a lot more tactical diversity, especially considering which side you're going to be on, which is the attackers or the defenders. For the attackers, there's a lot of ways for them to approach the situation when it comes to attacking. They can basically go for a window, rappel up the buildings and attack from above, find a secret basement or something and attack from below, or basically just blow open the front door or even blow a hole in the wall. There is a lot of ways you can approach the situation, and that's what really makes this game very incredibly tactical, especially if you look at the layout of the level and look for any weaknesses that you can find, especially when it comes to defensive position the defenders will have, who obviously will need to take every advantage they can with whatever they have available to them, since they're only going to be in a few select areas. And since their devices are going to be in specific places, they're going to have to be very crafty with how they defend that objective. So the level design of Rainbow Six Siege works for both sides. And there's a lot of thought that has to go into it when you approach the mission, the objective, and how you're going to win or if you're going to lose. You have no idea what the outcome can be, and if you're a very skillful player and know the maps by the back of your hand, you're pretty much going to have a very good time. And the graphics themselves also help out with the level design, as the explosions and everything do look pretty nice, and it's funny how detailed these levels are. And of course, the defenders themselves can do even more stuff, like reinforcing certain specific areas like walls or even like certain panels that are in the ceiling or in the floor, which can be used as little areas for the attackers to like peek through, which is very interesting to see. So there's a lot of things you can do throughout the levels in this game, and that's very nice to see that even though there's not much, even though there isn't a campaign, you can still do a lot of shit in the multiplayer when it comes to looking around the levels and seeing what you can do when it comes to either attacking or defending. Now we come to the more bad parts of the game, the kind of reason why this game is heavily multiplayer based and its downside to it, and that is the whole microtransactions, and there is a lot of them. And they are poorly done. There is so many different ways you can get things in this game that it's just absurd. It's like you have renown points, which are your usual points you get after completing matches or winning, and this also differs with like your performance and everything. You have like boosters you can use so you can gain more of renown, and there's also like alpha packs which can like give you some sort of way to get customizations, gear and stuff a little bit quicker. But there's the way these microtransactions are being put out is very kind of confusing. Like, there's renown, but there's also these things called R6 credits, and it's like you don't really know. These are the only way you can basically get these is if you pay for them. So yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. That's just completely ridiculous. Also, the amount of grinding you have to do just so you can get like camos or charms or even just a simple piece of customization or even another operator, it takes quite a lot, and operators are pretty pricey when you look at how much there is, and the amount of points you get from a match sometimes it takes a lot, and it's a very grindy game, Siege. Despite how fun it is to play, you can get to a point where it's like you don't want to grind for a new operator, which can take forever, and you'd rather just like get the R6 credits so you can buy the bundles that have like each year of characters. Since it's like year 1 characters, year 2 characters, and then we're on to year 3, so there won't be that just yet. But yes, the microtransactions are just absolutely ridiculous, and there's even like a luck-based thing when it comes to the alpha packs. Like, there's a luck chance thing that the percentage of it goes up more and more if you win matches and everything, and it's like every match you complete you have a better chance of getting an alpha pack. That's just kind of ridiculous, really. And even if you get enough renown points, you can even get more alpha packs anyway. So that is the one big huge downside of Rainbow Six Siege, is the fact that it's just the huge sheer size of the microtransactions in the shopping area is just ridiculous. And for a game like this, even though Siege has gotten better over time, the game didn't start off too well either. There was a huge lack of like quantity to the game. You really didn't have a lot to use. There wasn't a lot to begin with in this game. And even though this game has gotten better slowly over time, thanks to the amounts of updates and free DLC that has been given to us, the game has had a lot to build up to just so it can get to this point. But even then, this game is still fairly better compared to its Vegas counterparts. Overall, Rainbow Six Siege is definitely an improvement over the Vegas games. Getting rid of the campaign, which was the main weakness, and deciding to focus on the multiplayer was definitely a good choice. But the fact that the multiplayer is let down by the fact that it's taken this long just to get a decent amount of content, and the fact that it is hugely interrupted by the amount of microtransactions there is, and the fact that the customization for the operators themselves isn't that great either, and just the amount of grinding that it's going to take just to like get some of this stuff is quite disappointing in those regards. But Rainbow Six Siege overall as a package is not that disappointing. It's actually a very fun, enjoyable game when you get down to it, and if you just look past this sort of stuff. And as a tactical shooter, it works very well, as pretty much the core elements of the game is skill, precision, and teamwork, which is definitely a nice change of pace from your usual first-person shooters where you go running around trying to get as many kills as you can. Rainbow Six Siege has definitely changed the way we should look at shooters and focus it a bit more on a tactical viewpoint, giving this game a sort of an advantage over other shooters I've seen in the past. So overall, I'm going to give Rainbow Six Siege... So, that is my review of Rainbow Six Siege, a fairly decent tactical shooter developed by Ubisoft nonetheless, and we've seen how their track record is usually. And yep, this was a fairly decent game they finally did. In fact, they finally managed to improve a franchise that has really been taking some damage from me lately. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Leave a like down below, subscribe, comment on what you think of the game, comment on what other games you think I could do, share the video on social media, and I'll see you guys in the next random video.